So you're a PT or PTA grad who's feeling the spark of something more. Maybe you dream of building your own business, one that's constructed around your vision, one that empowers you to make a real difference on your terms. This feeling, it's the entrepreneurial itch, and you're not alone. Countless PTs and PTAs are taking the leap to entrepreneurship, crafting careers that are as unique as they are. Welcome to the Innovate and Rehabilitate, the Entrepreneurial PT podcast. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the world of PTpreneurship with inspiring physical therapists and physical therapist assistants just like you who are crushing it on their terms. We'll uncover their secrets, their struggles, and the incredible impact they're making. From building your PT boss dreams to navigating the business side of things, we'll equip you with the knowledge and inspiration to turn your vision into reality. So, whether you're just curious about starting your own business or you're already out there making your dreams a reality, this podcast is for you. Get ready to unleash your inner entrepreneur. Let's do this.
My name is Scott Giles, and I'm the founder of Score Builders and your host for today's podcast. I want to extend a special welcome to today's guests, Maggie Mills and Amy Graber. Maggie and Amy are sisters who, along with their other sister, Carrie, founded Fit Family Physical Therapy in 2021. Their business is a direct pay, direct access, mobile physical therapy practice offering a broad range of services for patients throughout the entire lifespan. I'm extremely excited to talk to Maggie and Amy today since their business checks a lot of exciting boxes for me. Direct pay, mobile delivery, family business, and female-owned and operated. Maggie and Amy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. We're so excited to be here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, it's great. I really appreciate the time. And I should say, the weird things happen like this all the time, but how I came to know about your super cool business is that one of our 43 Score Builders instructors, who you know as Holly, I don't think we're violating anything HIPAA there, had a total knee replacement and discovered your really cool business. And so I sent out a general, our people are pretty well connected. They deal with a lot of people. They've been doing this for a long time. And so when we started this podcast, I sent something out to them saying, hey, I'd love to hear any kind of entrepreneurs that you folks are familiar with that you think would be good for the show. And they came up with you folks right away, and we reached out, and here we are today. So again, small world, but I'm really happy that you folks joined us. So let's jump in. But before we get into the business details, maybe you could both tell me how you happen to become physical therapists and how you decided to pursue that as an educational pursuit.
Sure. I honestly, the story is similar for both of us, but I'll go first, and then I'll let Maggie sort of add in her own nuances. But we both grew up playing competitive soccer at a pretty high level, and spent most of our time either at soccer practice or at a sort of gym, which was a physical therapy clinic. And so we had our fair share of injuries in playing sports, of course, but we had just spent so much time around the physical therapists and the staff there. Both of us kind of came to really love the profession and appreciate the profession. And I think we both always generally had an interest in sort of the science and physiology aspect of, studies. And so that took us there as well. And then both played soccer in college and sort of, again, had our fair share of injuries there and spent more time around physical therapy clinic. And I'll let Maggie kind of take it from there.
Yeah, we, like Amy said, we've been around it for a long time. And this was, it felt like a very natural progression for us, where we love being in a competitive athletic world. We love working with different types of people. And this was a way that we could continue to do that after finishing kind of our athletic careers, so to speak.
Okay, no, that's great. And they're being very humble, but this is like big time soccer. This is like Pac-12 D1 soccer. So you guys are studs, is what you didn't want to say, but I thought I'd bring that up because you don't get to that level without some serious dedication. And of course, like you both said, some serious injuries associated with that. Okay, right. So obviously you guys come full circle back together, and Carrie gets involved in this. But you folks did you graduate 3 years apart in terms of the physical therapy program?
Mm-hmm. Yes, 3 years.
Okay,
so never actually spent enough any crossover years. Maggie left just as I was entering.
Okay. So Maggie, tell us where you went, kind of what you were involved in, and then Amy, I'm going to jump in when you get out of school, and then how you guys eventually came together.
Okay. Yeah. So I started immediately out of school in a pediatric practice. Amy and I, while also being competitive together, loving competitive athletes, we also have a pretty big love of pediatrics and kids. So that felt like a really natural place for me to start. I then transitioned to a fast paced ortho clinic where my boss allowed me also to see pediatrics. It's obviously a little bit of a different model. So to be able to work in both it was great of him to let me do that to gain the experience. And then I actually transitioned when I had my first kiddo to a direct pay service through another company. And then once my sisters moved back here, then we kind of got the band together and started our own business. But I'll let Amy talk and then we can kind of share the details of that.
Great.
Yeah. So as soon as I exited school, I got a job in the sites of one of my clinical rotations. So I was also an outpatient pediatrics, and I worked there for about a year. And then my husband and I moved out of state, out of Arizona to California for him to complete his residency. And so while I was there, I felt like I didn't quite want to pigeonhole myself yet in pediatrics, and really wanted to still build on my orthopedic skills. So took a job in outpatient private practice orthopedics, and then did that for a few years, and then wanted to get my feet back into pediatrics again. So took a home health pediatric job. And then we both decided we wanted to move back to Arizona, be close to family. And it was sort of the stars aligning. We had a decision to make in terms of, was I going to look for a job there? And instead, I sort of, we all sort of petitioned each other that maybe this was the right time to try and start a business together. It was just a natural time in all of our lives. Carrie, our sister who helps us run the practice, does most of the operations, was leaving sort of corporate job. She was ready to have her first kid. Maggie was sort of at a crossroads too, in terms of, she had been at this other practice for a little while, and then I was moving back. So I'll let Maggie sort of speak a little bit more about what the wheels, what set the wheels really in motion, and how we got going with all of that. But in short terms, it was just the time was right, and we were all ready, and sort of the stars aligned. It was now or never, realistically, with what our family paths were going to be in the future.
That's really interesting. So Maggie, so now look, you said, well, first of all, a couple of things. One is that I think it's really interesting that you guys are big time athletes, and you tend to think ortho, and you both end up in pediatrics, which I love, right? I mean, I think that's super cool. Number one, but Maggie, when you one of your jobs, you had a lot of experience with direct pay. So was that always the plan, or was there any talk about a traditional physical therapy practice, or like, were you kind of the ringleader in terms of bringing these folks together, being like, hey guys, I think we could do it with this model, or how did that go down?
I really think it was all of us. Yes, I think I was kind of the voice of, this is what I have been doing. This is what has worked. This is what has maybe not worked. I think I am probably the least risk taker of the group. So I probably would have never done it by myself. So Amy and Carrie were also huge in that. Carrie, Amy and I say we couldn't have done it if we didn't have Carrie, because Carrie is quite literally the brains behind, a lot of our marketing, a lot of our website, all of our customer relations, the initial customer relations. So everyone kind of brought their own piece to it. And I feel like they gave me the push. I came in with the experience of, like I said, kind of, this is what has worked. This has not worked. This is what we'd like to do differently, which obviously is valuable.
Yeah, sure. So Amy, you said that Carrie was involved in corporate, and I think in one of our previous discussions, you might have said she was involved with some startups. Could you just elaborate a little bit more on her kind of business background? Because obviously this ends up being a critical piece to the Tri Alliance here.
Yeah, she so she had a short stint in the corporate world, consulting type world right after college. And then a friend of hers from college started in basically as a sort of a buyback of old electronics business. And they started just extremely humble beginnings and grew to a really successful startup within 5 years. It was very fast growing. So Carrie sort of had the experience of just a lot thrown at her at once. And she was from the get-go the operations COO, chief operations officer. And so she just had experience with the ins and outs of client relations, marketing, financial information. I feel like, Maggie and I, of course, have our doctorate degrees in physical therapy. But sometimes the one thing that's missing from a professional education is sort of the business aspect. And I think, in working in various practices before, we had the luxury, or I should say the interest in how these operations were run and what was successful and what was working. But again, to speak to what Maggie said, there's zero way that we could have made this happen without Carrie's knowledge. Maybe there was a way, but it would have not has been successful as it was in the beginning. And it would have taken a lot more trial and error. There are things that just feel so comfortable to us because of Carrie's background and knowledge. And she really, I think it's mostly her confidence in the business operations that really helps us, feel confident in what we can do to bring to patients.
That's great. And I think Carrie's playing an important role today, correct?
Yeah.
Taking care of all the kiddos, right?
Yeah.
That's right. I love the alliance. So look, this gets tricky, right? I mean, having partners in any business, especially a new business, can be tricky. But having family members, I mean, look, that's there are pros and cons to that. So was there any trepidation, obviously you guys are very close. You wouldn't even consider this, right? But being close doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be good business partners. So I'd like to hear a little bit about that. And also I'd like to hear what your parents thought about this idea when it was pitched to them, just because, the most important thing as a parent of 3 children myself is that all our kids are copacetic and get along and love each other. And, this is kind of a high stress kind of deal. So how did that go over?
As far as with our parents, it went over well. They are very confident in us. They might have made a few kind of suggestions here and there, but my dad has owned his own business for a very long time, building custom homes. My mom has her own business kind of on the side of her daily job. So they're very, comfortable in that aspect, and it's helped. They've even given some advice in some areas. And then I'll let Amy speak to the other part.
Okay.
Yeah, if you would have asked us this question 10 years ago when we were still a little less mature and maybe not quite as established in our family, roles and careers as well, that question might have been answered differently. But I think at the time we were starting this business, one of the very critical things we did at the very beginning was to sit down and say, what do we want out of this business? And, we're 3 different individuals, but it was very clear that we had the same goals in starting the business. And I think the same values behind, patient care and client interactions, because Carrie's not directly involved in patient care, but that part honestly made it easier because we knew we had this level of trust and that the people we were working with shared the same values. There are, of course, nuances and tricky parts of working with family. But, it's almost easier sometimes to deal with conflict because we've been dealing with conflict as sisters our whole life.
Sure.
Sometimes it's trickier to deal with people you aren't as familiar with, and you have to be more skilled and tactful in how you deal. But quite honestly, we don't have a lot of conflict. We really respect each other's roles and what each offers and brings to the table. And I think all of us know that without each one of us on the team, we wouldn't be able to create this business. And so I do think that we sort of stay in our lanes and respect each other. and we're pretty good communicators, I would say. So the story isn't as exciting as it sounds, but it actually works out pretty well.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't sound like there's going to be a reality show based on this.
No.
But I think that is a positive thing. So good for you
Yes.
folks for being that close. That's beautiful. All right, so let's get into the business a little bit, because I think your model's pretty unique. The type of the lifespan that you see is unique. I think you're kind of trying to redefine traditional home care services to some extent. And that's not suggesting that home care services don't offer tremendous quality, but I think your approach is a little bit different. And I came away from our kind of pre-meeting, really impressed with the commitment to excellence, what you look for and the providers you bring on, et cetera. So maybe you could both talk a little bit about the scope of the business and kind of what it's been like for you to kind of put your stamp on the quality piece of this.
I can go first.
Amy, why don't you jump? Okay, sure.
Okay. Sure. Yes. So we came into this wanting to provide a level of care that we felt like we truly were not seeing in the home care arena. We've talked about, we have humongous ortho backgrounds, not just from our work, but from what we've done in the past. And we really, in the case of a lot of patients, wanted to be able to bring a more functional, dynamic treatment style to the home. We strongly felt like people appreciated the convenience of home care, but were often left wanting for a little bit more as far as their return to, recreational activity, hiking, walking for longer distances. Pickleball is really big here, so that's a really common one. So that's truly what we set out to do. Our goal is to bring the ortho area to the home. We bring in equipment, we bring in BOSUs, we bring in TRX straps, so we have some weights, we have weighted balls. So we really try to make sure that when you are done with us, you are ready to go back to whatever activity that you were doing, and it's not necessarily a transition to outpatient ortho at that time.
Yeah,
Amy, do you want to add to that a little bit?
I think one word we use all the time is, as sort of buzzword, is we are very functional in our, exercise prescription, intervention, instruction. All of those things are very important to us. When we walk in the door, we're asking right away what their goals are. Again, there are tremendous home health companies that provide physical therapy in home. One thing I find sometimes that's lacking is just that sort of last bit of transition from just getting someone from daily life ADLs to the getting back to wanting to play 3 rounds of golf in a weekend. There's quite a stark contrast between those two levels of function. And we sort of felt like that's what was missing in the home atmosphere. And often it was just sort of passed along to the orthopedic clinic or private practice clinic, any type of orthopedic-based outpatient site. So that was something we thought we could bring to the table. We were both very fortunate in our PT school education was very neuro-based, actually. And so we have a lot of, balance and gait activities that we can do with clients in home too, that are a lot more dynamic than maybe the typical ones that we would see in a home health practice. So that was sort of our niche in a way, is bringing the function and dynamic atmosphere into the home environment. And I, like Maggie said, I really think that's been well received by patients and sort of unexpected, but in a positive way.
No, that's great. And I would think the pediatrics also, I'm not sure about your geographic region, but in our area, there's a real shortage of home care physical therapy services for preschool individuals or even individuals slightly older than that. And having you both have experience in that's I'm sure that must have helped get the practice off the ground a little bit in terms of something unique that you folks offered.
Yes, definitely. That's kind of the other part that we can speak to is the pediatric, like you talked about here, there's not a lot of options for as big of a city that we currently live in, or metropolitan area. And, we have a heavy seasonal load here. So kind of as you kick into September, October, I have patients that call and sometimes they say they're calling on a, say, 8-week-old baby, and it could be 6 to 8 weeks before they're even going to be able to be seen consistently. So for us in the pediatric world, a little bit, it's about breaking down these barriers to getting quicker care. And oftentimes in babies with some of your more typical, orthopedic type complaints or developmental delay type complaints, quicker care often means a quicker length of care, quicker return to, not needing physical therapy. So for us, that's trying to kind of break down that more insurance-based model that's, you're going to be seen once a week and it's going to take 6 months. So we really try to get them in quicker. We try to give more onus to the parents as far as these are the exercises you can do inside your own house. And I feel like in the parent world, that is super helpful for them because I could do all kinds of exercises in a clinic, but if they don't know how to implement them in their own house, there's just a much bigger obstacle to them actually doing them. So we feel like in a couple ways, we've been trying to kind of carve a little niche that's not just care as we've seen it in the pediatric world.
That's great. And Amy, you mentioned your school doing a really good job on the neuro side, especially, and we should mention that's Northern Arizona University. So you guys are shining examples of the graduates. So that's wonderful to hear. What are patients' attitudes towards? And again, you're in a very metropolitan area, so I don't know how much saturation there is in direct pay clinics, but I still think in most areas we're on the very kind of front end of that. Has there been a lot of resistance from patients or I mean, it's a little bit different too, because now you're collecting money or funds from them. And then also, you have numerous physical therapists who are working for you. And so you're also having to pitch, physical therapists on, you've got to find quality people that you folks are compatible with and you think can deliver the quality of care that you'd like to administer. How has direct pay made that? What's that transition been like from the patient perspective and from your fellow coworkers?
From a patient perspective, I would say if we're looking at leads that come in, I would say it's about 50-50 in terms of, people are interested in it or they are not. And there's still a very large population that wants to utilize insurance-based care. And that was sort of a mindset that we had to be comfortable with going into this practice. This is not going to be for everyone. And we can't get discouraged when we have people that are wanting to utilize insurance-based care. If that was the case, we wouldn't have lasted long because it's still a very prominent model in today's physical therapy world, in most of the medical world. And so this was something we had to be comfortable with, that our services were not going to be for everyone, but we needed to find a way to reach those patients who were interested and saw the value in it. On the other end of the spectrum, the one kind of nice thing about direct access and direct pay is that a lot of the patients finding us are actually coming directly to us. They're not being referred by a physician. And many of them are therefore searching for private pay or direct pay services because they want the convenience of the in-home physical therapy. So in that sense, there's already a little bit of buy-in, which is, makes the initial evaluation a little bit easier, I will say, because they're expecting that level of quality of care. I think the hard part, or the challenging part, and the part that we really have had to get skilled in is sort of selling the model for continued physical therapy. What is that going to look like for the patient who is perhaps used to the 3 times a week for 4 weeks model that you might see in an insurance outpatient-based clinic? A lot of the times we are heavy on the home instruction so that patients don't have to utilize private pay so often for visits, but we can get the same amount of outcomes that we desire in a shorter amount of visits. And that actually translates to quite a positive attitude among our clients. So I'll let Maggie speak to sort of how we have to educate our contractors and find our contractors for in this model. But that's sort of our patients' attitudes. I hope that answers the question there.
No, that's great. And Maggie, just one other thing, if you could add to your answer here, because I thought it was super interesting, because when we talked earlier, because I feel there's some I don't know. I think it's a misconception. There's some therapists feel like, oh yeah, you just put out a shingle, you put out your sign and, direct pay and people just start flocking in. And you talked a little bit about some of the early marketing processes, to see physicians and that process as well. So I want to give people a realistic look at some of the battle scars that you folks have from this as well. So not just recruiting therapists, but if you could just touch on the marketing part of it, because it's not for the faint of heart.
No, it's not for the faint of heart. And we are about 3 years in and we still, it's still a little bit of a battle, especially when you're trying to branch out to some new ones. Amy and Carrie actually went marketing maybe a couple weeks ago to a new couple of concierge practices, and it was unsuccessful. That is pretty much the only word for it. So it is a lot of trial and error. Our initial strategy was a lot of boots on the ground, going into offices, kind of cold calling, if you will, by either calling and trying to set up a lunch or going in and offering to, again, set up a lunch or bring coffee, something like that. And Amy, I don't know, what would our success rate be? Maybe 25%, if that. So it's a lot of, it's a lot of work, and we are constantly trying to reevaluate how we can be more successful. Our more recent strategies have been focusing a little bit more on, SEO and website optimization, because we feel like that's kind of where we're getting more of the direct to consumer marketing. But it is, no, it's not for the faint of the heart at all. And then as far as, sorry, what was the other one you wanted me to talk
just
about?
In terms of attracting, because what's your staff look like now and how did you get those folks on board?
Right.
Meaning for PTs.
Yes. So we have hired over probably Amy, the last 18 months or so, 2 years. We've hired a couple of contractors. Amy and Carrie and I are the only employees in the business. And then we've hired contractors to help us either fill a niche, a different niche than Amy and I can fill, or fill a different area that, again, we can't get to, or overlap with our area if it's a busy area. That, again, takes a lot of weeding through resumes, going through interviews, having discussions about how we, what we think, based on X, Y, and Z. But we have successfully hired five contractors now that have been with us, and we are super, super thrilled with all of them. It is a different model, like we talked about, to go in and to have to sell yourself a bit and your quality of care than the insurance-based model. So we've looked a lot for people that have experience treating patients. We really make an effort, not make an effort, that's not the right word, but we want them to have experience in treating. Initially, we say kind of at least, hopefully a year and a half, if not more than that, before we even want to really even do an interview. Because if you're not comfortable in how you treat, you're going to have a hard time selling why someone paying directly for that is going to be beneficial for them more than just your standard home health where they can use insurance.
Right. Yeah, I think there is a different expectation from the patients as well, because it really is a concierge service, right? And you're not going to, it's like a hotel, right? You're not going to go spend $400 a night at a hotel and have inferior service, not nice rooms, not nice amenities, et cetera. You're expecting big things when you're putting that kind of money down, right? But it is interesting too, because some of the limits on number of visits through traditional insurance and some of these co-payments are getting out of control. So if you can more effectively, like Amy, you said this earlier, if you can more effectively manage, the number of visits, get similar outcomes in half the visits by the time you factor in the co-payments and deductibles and everything else associated with it. It can really be cost effective depending on the person's unique situation. So I think in some ways that makes the argument easier or more palatable to the patient when they really sit down and look at the numbers. And I think we're going to see more and more of that kind of continuing in the future. So, and by the way, I want to tell people this because I asked this question because I always want to know these things. I asked them, look, is there another sibling? because I always feel bad. I feel like it's the Jonas Brothers, right? But one of the Jonas Brothers, I don't even know about the Jonas Brothers, but maybe there's a Jonas brother who's not part of the band or didn't have talent or like whatever. And I'm happy to tell all the listeners that there are 3 siblings and they're all involved. So that's pretty awesome, because I don't know, that would bum me out for some reason, but I'm super happy that that's the case. So anyways, in case you're wondering.
Yeah, we didn't leave anyone out.
I love that. All right. So look, you're a female-owned and operated business, which I also love, which we're really trying to focus as many of that type of business on the show. But anything unique from that perspective? I mean, I would hope in today's day and age, it's really not the case. But were there any special challenges, or do you guys have any mentorship, or anything that maybe would be helpful for aspiring entrepreneurs to know in terms of that type of ownership?
We sort of talked about this together, anticipating that this might be a question, but physical therapy is sort of transitioning to a higher population of females. And so in some ways, the expectation when we are marketing or doing any community activities is that I think people now expect females almost. So sometimes it's a leg up. What I would say, and I don't know if we did this consciously or unconsciously when we started the business, knowing that we're 3 females, is, in our initial sort of just trying to build relationships phase with community partners or physicians, we did tend to gravitate towards other female, either practice owners or community business owners. And I think we built sort of a solid network of females in the beginning. Of course, we still spent the time and spoke to male physicians and male business owners. But sure. I do think that there was a little bit of camaraderie there that just helped boost confidence. In terms of, whether we've had any challenges, maybe here and there are some times that we've had to sort of assert ourselves a little more firmly to people who are expecting a male in our place. But in starting a business, I want to be transparent in saying that, the playing field is relatively level because you really start from ground zero. And it's a lot of work regardless of who you are. I think the most important quality, is how much you're willing to fail and problem solve and to challenge yourself to step outside of, what you're comfortable with. And, that doesn't change whether you're a female or male. And I think that, that was something at least we were all prepared for and helped us. So that would be my advice. But other than that, I feel like, we've been fortunate in that we've been well respected in our community and the network of providers that we've spoken to too.
No, it's great. It's obvious the kind of work you folks do. And I'm sure, as your business continues, a lot of your business, I would imagine, is word of mouth. And that's the best kind of referral source you can possibly ever get. So that's wonderful as well. All right. So look, you guys are crazy. Carrie's crazy. You all have a gaggle of children. You have spouses. I don't even know what number a gaggle is, but you know what I mean.
It's a lot.
You guys are busy. Yeah, you're busy. You're crazy busy. And I'm sure your kids are as active as you were when you were young. So how's this worked out? Better, worse, the same in terms of work-life balance for family life, for your spouses? Tell me about that.
I think it depends on the day. I like
no,
it's been fantastic. I think it depends on the day for any of us. If we could tell you if our work-life balance is better, worse. We've also added children to the equation, more children, each of us, as we've done this. So obviously that plays a humongous role. But in general, in comparison to your standard orthopedic practice, your standard pediatric practice, it has improved our work-life balance. We have flexibility to be home with our children. We have flexibility if we have to kind of switch up the day that we're treating. And we're working with family. So like we talked about, we all pitch in at different points. In fact, I think I have to see some extra patients this week, and Amy's going to help me with my youngest, who's not in full-time school yet. So as far as that goes, that's helped significantly. However, I would say running a business adds kind of a different layer to it, that you find yourself kind of working in the margins a little bit more. We meet, a couple times a month via Zoom at night after our kids go to bed. We have to respond to text messages a little bit faster, but I really feel like you're going to get that no matter what kind of business you have, when you own your own business. And I think for us, the payoff is worth it, and the eventual, the ceiling is higher for us as far as more flexibility, having more contractors to assist us. So for us, I speak for myself. I do think it's worth it. I'm sure Amy and Carrie feel the same, but there's a balance to it. There's some give and take, definitely.
That's great. I mean, I just think it's go ahead, Amy. Yeah.
I would say that it's sort of shifted the area of stress. Where I used to feel stress was seeing 25 plus patients a day in an orthopedic environment. And that felt overwhelming to me, to the point where I would get home and I was so burnt out. I couldn't enjoy the relationships that I had, at home, and transparently. And so this has shifted the stress in a sense. But when I am with patients, I tell people that is the most fun, engaging part of our job. And it doesn't feel stressful. I don't feel pressed for time. And so in that sense, my mental health in that sense is so much better. There's certainly times where we feel stressed about task lists and things that need to be accomplished, because you're always trying to grow. You're always trying to succeed if you're out there starting a business. But at the end of the day, there are opportunities that we have because we've started this business in being with our families and being able to be with our kids for a greater portion of the week, that we would not be afforded in a full-time position elsewhere. And so I think that was one of the reasons we all wanted to start this business. And that was one of our whys. And it has come to fruition in that sense. So yes, we work in the margins a lot more. You find the 20 minutes here and there to bang out a to-do list item, but it's certainly better in my opinion overall. And it's a new challenge that's exciting, and it's a different part of our brains that we get to utilize every day. And that really contributes to a positive atmosphere too, for us, I think too.
And I like that term actually. I haven't heard that. No, I was just gonna say working in the margins. That's perfect. I mean, it really is, right? And sometimes those margins get kind of wide.
Yeah, some days.
Owning a business, right?
We would also be super remiss if we did not point out the fact that our husbands, the three of them, have been incredibly supportive. And we realize that a little bit of luck or good fortune to be able to do this, as our husbands all have very stable jobs that allowed us to kind of take the risk to start and build and grow something like this. So we wouldn't be here without them. We'll say that.
No, that's great. It's good you said that, because they're going to be listening. So that's also that's also super helpful. But you're right. I mean, that's huge, and that kind of relates to this kind of last question. It's my favorite podcast is How I Built This, and one of the questions that the host always asks folks is, when reflecting on your business, how much of success do you attribute to luck, and how much to intelligence and hard work? And you've certainly mentioned I think you've mentioned a lot of both, quite frankly, right? That you were in a position where the risk didn't seem crazy because you had supportive spouses, you had some funding available from yourself, from your spouses, whatever. Probably the most important thing, right, is you had supportive spouses that were willing for you to take on this venture. And I think, flexibility becomes even more critical as the children become older, and that never goes away. And I think that's one of the reasons why therapists really look to entrepreneurial activities, because it does provide that. But you've also provided really clear examples of the grind that you folks have put into this. And obviously you're very intelligent. You can just tell by, listening to you, but, I don't know. Where do you think that balance is? 50-50? Do you think it's 75% hard work, 25% fortune? What do you think?
I don't know. I'd probably say it's more of a shift between, maybe 60-40. The risk taking, is a big piece of it. And that's always my advice to people who ask about starting their own business, right out of school, is, are you ready to assume that risk? If you look at Maggie and Carrie and I, we were all at least five years at the minimum out of school before we started this business. And so we had pretty well established, financial security, even just on our end. And then we also had spouses. So that piece is some of that is luck and fortune. Not everyone has that luxury of financial security in this day and age, especially sometimes with the cost of education. But I would say that, still a good 60% of it is hard work. And as we've mentioned here, it just as you said, Scott, it's not like we just opened the doors and business flowed in. We're very transparent with people that we're 3 years in, and what you see on the outside may not look like what you see in our text thread at the end of the night. So there's always stuff that we have to troubleshoot and be willing to problem solve about. But yeah, we're very honest that we do have the luxury of financial security in that sense that we had both worked for all three of us had worked for a while and also had spouses. And also childcare, which is huge, an expense that could go on and on about, but
oh yeah, believe it.
Yeah. And I would say, to speak to a little bit of a different aspect of it, as far as kind of maybe the marketing goes, I would say for us, sometimes luck or knowing someone, we grew up here in the Scottsdale area, so we felt like we had a pretty wide network. So maybe knowing someone got us, a conversation with a doctor or a conversation with a referral coordinator.
Sure.
But we feel like hard work, our quality of care, and the product we put out has kind of kept us in that conversation, year after year, if that makes sense. So
it makes total sense. Well, ladies, thank you so much for, joining us today. I love this. I love the family part of it. I mean, I don't know. I hope you appreciate that for as much as it is. I mean, there aren't a ton of families where the three siblings could integrate. It's clear the love you have for each other, and you're fortunate that you all have skills, really meaningful skills that allow you to do this as well. And I also think mom and dad got to get a lot of credit here, because you don't raise children like this and have that. So kudos. I don't know your mom and dad, but kudos to your mom and dad. Kudos to you folks. And I certainly wish you continued success. And I appreciate you sharing your story with our listeners today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate it.
We really love this chat, and excited to hear kind of the other guests you guys have on here. It's fun. It's a great idea.
Well, thank you. And thanks for getting Holly back to pickleball, because if you didn't know that, I don't know what, I don't know what would happen.
The world might end.
But anyways, yeah, exactly. But well done on that. So thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this story as much as I did. And we'll see you for our next podcast.
And there you have it, another dose of PT-preneurial inspiration to fuel your journey. Check out more inspiring stories from PTs and PTAs out there making waves by listening and subscribing to our podcasts on your favorite streaming platforms. And don't forget to rate and review this podcast. Thanks for listening.